All right, everybody, get ready for this. Because today, we are going deep, deep into the world of economics and geopolitics. It's going to be a wild ride.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking about the rivalry that's been brewing between the U.S. and the BRICS nations.
Right.
And just so everyone's on the same page, BRICS is no longer that original group of 5. It's expanded.
It has, yeah.
We're talking 9 members now,
Huge.
with Iran, the UAE, Ethiopia, and Egypt all joining the club.
Big players.
And hold on to your hats because 34 more countries are lining up to join.
Wow.
It's like the hottest ticket in town.
Yeah, it seems like it.
But here's where things get really interesting. Former and current U.S. President Donald Trump, he is not thrilled about this.
Yeah.
Not one bit. He's even gone so far as to threaten, get this, a 100% tariff
Ooh.
on any country that tries to ditch the U.S. dollar. So we've got to ask, are we on the brink of an economic war?
Yeah.
What does all of this mean for global trade? And let's be honest, what does it mean for our wallets? We need answers, and that's why we've got our expert here to break it all down.
Well, I think what's really interesting here is that BRICS has been around for a while,
They have.
but they've been playing like the long game.
Okay.
For years, they've been quietly setting up these alternatives to the Western-dominated financial system.
Like what? Give us an example.
Like their new development bank, for instance.
Okay, hold on. The what bank?
The new development bank.
Yeah.
It's BRICS' own version of the World Bank, essentially.
Oh, okay.
And they're using it, to fund all these major infrastructure projects.
Oh, interesting.
In developing countries, completely bypassing the traditional Western lenders.
So they're cutting out, like, the middleman.
Essentially.
Wow.
And that's actually attracting even some U.S. allies.
Really?
Yeah. So they're not just talking, they're putting their money where their mouth is.
That's pretty powerful. Okay, but back to Trump for a second.
Yeah.
100% tariffs. Isn't that a bit extreme? Even for him.
Well, Trump sees this growing BRICS club,
Mm-hmm.
and especially their talk of a new currency as a direct threat to the U.S. dollar's power.
Okay.
And remember, the dollar being the world's main reserve currency,
Right.
That gives the U.S. huge leverage,
Yeah.
and he's not going to give that up easily.
No.
So, yeah, he's playing hardball.
Yeah.
But is he bluffing? That's the billion-dollar question, literally.
That's the question, isn't it? Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this new BRICS currency. Could it actually replace the dollar? I can barely understand the exchange rates as it is.
Well, think of it this way. Right now, most international trade happens in U.S. dollars.
Yeah.
And that means that countries, they need to hold dollars in reserve, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that gives the U.S. a lot of influence.
It does.
A BRICS currency, well, that would challenge that dynamic.
Okay, but could it actually replace the dollar? Like completely?
That's a whole different story.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to understand. What would that even look like? Would I be paying for my groceries in yuan one day?
Well, it's not really about, carrying around a new type of cash.
Oh,
It's
right.
more about shifting the global financial power.
Okay.
So imagine countries no longer needing dollars for things like oil
Right.
or international loans being given in a BRICS currency instead.
Okay.
That's the kind of change they're aiming for.
I see.
But it's a huge undertaking. There are a lot of obstacles.
Like what?
Well, for starters, BRICS itself, it's a pretty diverse group.
Right.
You've got massive economies like China and India,
Uh,
but then you've also got, smaller players like South Africa,
okay.
and getting them all on the same page.
Yeah.
Economically and politically, it's a really tall order.
I bet. So it's not just about, printing some fancy new bills. There's a lot more to it.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot of behind-the-scenes maneuvering going on.
A lot of moving parts.
Speaking of which, BRICS hasn't always been this, bold, have they?
No.
What's changed?
Well, early on, they were very careful not to step on the U.S.'s toes.
Really?
Oh, yeah. They talked a lot about cooperation, not competition.
Okay.
But as their economies grew, so did their confidence.
I see.
And now they're openly challenging the U.S.
On what?
on things like sanctions and global financial rules.
Wow. Okay. Can you give me an example of that? Something real world that I can actually wrap my head around?
Well, look at how BRICS responded to the sanctions against Russia after the Ukraine conflict.
Okay.
So instead of isolating Russia, they actually stepped in to provide alternative trade routes
Oh, wow.
and financial mechanisms.
So they're like going around the U.S.
Essentially, yeah.
Wow.
It was a clear message that they were willing to stand up to the West.
Okay, so they're not just talking about alternatives. They're actively creating them. That's a pretty bold move.
It is.
But BRICS isn't this, like, monolithic block, is it? They've got their own, like, internal dramas going on.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, tell me about that.
Well, they have their own rivalries.
Okay.
And their own internal tensions.
Like what?
Well, China and India, for example, they have a long-standing border dispute.
Right.
And they're constantly vying for regional influence.
Okay.
It's kind of like a sibling rivalry, but on a global scale.
So are they really united against the U.S., or is it more complicated than that?
It's definitely more nuanced.
Okay, tell me more.
Well, research from Tufts University suggests that they're not necessarily out to topple the U.S.
Okay.
They just want a seat at the table.
Okay.
They want a say in how the global system is run.
So they want their voices heard.
Yeah, exactly. They're pushing for a more multipolar world where power is more evenly distributed.
Multipolar, so not just the U.S. calling all the shots anymore.
Right, exactly.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. But with all this tension, like, where do we go from here? Are we headed for a full-blown economic war, or is there any chance for things to, like, cool down?
Well, there's definitely a potential for things to spiral out of control.
Right.
If Trump follows through on his tariff threats,
Right.
things could get really messy really fast.
Yeah.
We're talking disrupted supply chains, soaring prices, maybe even shortages of certain products.
Okay, so like bare shelves at the store.
Potentially, yeah.
Oh, good.
And let's not forget the financial markets. Those would go haywire.
Oh, man. Okay, hold on. Before we all, like, run for the hills and start building our bunkers, are there any less apocalyptic scenarios?
Mm-hmm.
Is there any chance of the U.S. and BRICS, like, working things out?
Well, there's always a chance for diplomacy.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe they can find some middle ground, a way to, accommodate BRICS' ambitions without completely dethroning the dollar.
Yeah, or like a compromise.
Exactly, yeah.
Where everyone gets a little piece of the pie.
Exactly. But for that to happen, both sides need to be willing to budge a little.
Yeah.
The U.S. would need to accept that it's not the only superpower in town anymore, and BRICS would need to reassure the U.S. that they're not trying to completely overthrow the system.
Okay, so it's not all doom and gloom. There's a possibility of peaceful resolution.
Yeah, there is.
Okay, but let's be real. This is a really complex situation.
Yeah.
What's the one key takeaway that you think our listeners should really grasp?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that the world is changing.
Okay.
The old rules of the game are being rewritten. And both the U.S. and BRICS are trying to figure out their place in this new landscape.
It sounds like a pretty high-stakes poker game with the entire global economy on the line.
Yeah, it really is.
Okay, well, on that note, I think we should take a quick break. When we come back, we'll dive even deeper into the potential consequences of this whole economic showdown. Dude.
It's going to be good.
It is. All right, so we're back and ready to really get into the potential fallout from this economic showdown between the U.S. and BRICS. Before the break, we talked about some pretty dramatic scenarios, things like disrupted supply chains, global market chaos. I don't know about you, but I'm already feeling a little bit anxious just thinking about it.
Yeah, I think that's understandable.
Yeah.
I mean, the stakes are really high.
They are?
And the potential for disruption is very real.
Right.
But let's maybe try to break down some of these like complex concepts into something a little bit more relatable.
Yeah, I need a reality check. What would a trade war between the U.S. and BRICS actually look like for everyday people, people like me?
Okay, well, imagine you go to the grocery store, right? And the price of your favorite imported cheese has doubled because of tariffs.
Oh, no.
Or your car needs a new part, but it's back-ordered for months because the factory in China that makes it is caught in the crossfire.
Okay, now you're talking my language.
Yeah.
I can see how that would affect, my everyday life.
Right, and it goes beyond, just consumer goods.
Okay.
Think about like all the things that we rely on that are produced or assembled overseas,
Right.
Electronics, clothing, even medical supplies.
Right.
These supply chains are incredibly complex.
They are.
They're interconnected.
Yeah.
And any disruption could have a real ripple effect.
Wow.
Throughout the global economy.
So it's not just about like abstract economic indicators. It's about real-world consequences that, that hit us where it hurts.
Exactly.
Wallets are, our daily lives.
Yeah, and the impact wouldn't be limited to, just consumers.
Right.
Businesses would face higher costs, for raw materials, for shipping.
Right.
This could lead to job losses,
Oh, wow.
even bankruptcies.
Okay.
So we're talking about a potential domino effect that could really touch every corner of the global economy.
All right, you officially spooked me now, but
Right.
even if we avoid
Yep.
a full-blown trade war, this whole BRICS situation just seems like a power struggle,
Yeah.
like a clash of the titans.
You're hitting the nail on the head. This isn't just an economic, spat.
Okay.
This is about global dominance.
Right.
The U.S. is accustomed to calling the shots,
Yeah.
and they're not going to give up that position easily.
Right.
And on the other side, you've got BRICS flexing their muscles, demanding a greater say in how the world is run.
So it's a battle of ideologies as much as economies.
Absolutely. The U.S., they represent the established order, the status quo.
Okay.
While BRICS embodies the rising powers who want to reshape that order
To fit them better.
to better reflect their interest. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got these two really powerful forces just locked in a standoff.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any hope for a peaceful resolution, or are we just doomed?
Well, I wouldn't say we're doomed just yet.
Okay.
I mean, there's always room for diplomacy,
Okay.
for compromise.
Yeah.
The key is finding common ground, areas where both sides can agree to cooperate
Uh-huh.
without completely sacrificing their own interests.
So what would that kind of compromise look like? What would the U.S. have to give up?
Well, the U.S. would have to acknowledge, I think, that the world is changing.
Okay.
That its dominance is no longer absolute.
Right.
They'd need to be willing to accept a more multipolar world where other countries, like those in BRICS, have a greater say in global affairs.
So basically letting go of the reins a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah. They'd have to embrace a more collaborative approach
Okay.
to global governance,
Got it.
one where they're not, always calling the shots.
Okay. And what about BRICS? What would they need to do to kind of smooth things over?
Well, BRICS would need to reassure the U.S. that their goal isn't to completely dismantle the existing system,
Okay.
but to reform it.
Okay.
They'd need to emphasize their commitment to stability
Right.
and cooperation,
Yeah.
while still pushing for greater fairness
Okay.
and representation in the global economic and political order.
It's kind of a delicate balancing act.
Yeah,
Pushing for change without rocking the boat too much.
precisely. It's a tightrope walk,
Right.
and it requires a lot of trust.
Yeah.
And goodwill on both sides,
Which, let's face it, there isn't a lot of right now.
which is in short supply at the moment. Yeah.
You're not wrong. But let's be optimistic for a minute.
Okay.
Let's imagine they do manage to strike a deal.
Uh-huh.
What would that mean for the global economy? Would things just, go back to normal?
Well, I doubt things would ever go back to the old normal. But a successful compromise could usher in a new era
Okay.
of greater stability and predictability.
Right.
It would signal that the U.S. and BRICS can actually work together
Okay.
to address, shared challenges like climate change
Uh-huh.
and global economic development.
So a more collaborative and, dare I say, peaceful world.
Potentially, yeah. It would require both sides to move beyond their zero-sum mindset
Okay.
and recognize that cooperation can benefit everyone. It's a long shot.
Yeah.
But it's a goal worth striving for.
Well said. Well said. But for those of us who aren't diplomats or economists,
Right.
what should we be watching for to kind of understand how this is all playing out? What are the red flags that things are headed in the wrong direction?
Well, one key indicator is the rhetoric.
Yeah.
Listen to the language used by leaders on both sides.
Okay.
Are they emphasizing cooperation or confrontation? Are they talking about shared interests?
Right.
Or framing this as a win-lose scenario?
Right.
The tone and content of their speeches, I think, can be very telling.
So words matter, even in the world of geopolitics.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. But actions speak louder than words.
True.
So watch for concrete steps towards either escalation or de-escalation.
Okay.
Are they imposing new tariffs or sanctions,
No.
or are they engaging in diplomatic talks books and trying to find common ground.
That's right.
Those actions, I think, will reveal their true intentions.
More than just like a speech.
More than any speech or press release, yeah.
Okay, so pay attention to what they say and what they do.
Exactly.
Okay, anything else?
Well, keep an eye on the global economic landscape.
Okay.
Is trade between the U.S. and BRICS countries increasing or decreasing?
Okay.
Are businesses shifting their supply chains away from China? These are all indicators of whether the world is becoming more fragmented or more integrated.
So the economic data can kind of tell us a lot about what's really going on.
Yeah, it can give us a glimpse into the underlying dynamics.
This is all incredibly insightful. This
Yeah.
is really helping to paint a clearer picture of what's at stake.
Good.
But let's not forget that BRICS is not a monolith.
Right.
They have their own, internal struggles, competing interests.
They do, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
And those internal dynamics, I think, could play a major role in how this whole confrontation unfolds.
Okay, let's dive into that. What are some of the key tensions within BRICS that our listeners should be aware of?
Right.
Okay, so we're back, and in the final stretch of our deep dive into, well, this economic tug-of-war, I guess you could call it, between the U.S. and BRICS.
Yeah.
Before the break, we were really starting to kind of peel back the layers of this whole thing and explore those internal tensions within BRICS itself. It's like a reality show with world leaders.
It kind of is, isn't it? You've got, different personalities, different interests,
Yeah.
and a whole lot of drama unfolding on the world stage. But unlike a reality show, I mean, the stakes here are incredibly high.
Well, they are.
And the outcomes, have real world consequences.
They do.
For all of us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, so let's get into like the nitty-gritty here.
Okay.
What are some of the key differences and tensions within BRICS that our listeners should know about?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges that BRICS faces is just the sheer diversity of its members.
Okay.
You've got these economic powerhouses like China, which is already a major player in global finance.
Right.
And then you've got countries like South Africa, which are, still grappling with poverty.
Right.
And underdevelopment.
So they're not exactly starting from the same place.
No, not at all.
How does that impact like their ability to act as a united front?
Well, it creates a lot of friction
Yeah.
when it comes to like setting priorities and making decisions.
Right.
For example, China might be pushing for aggressive measures to de-dollarize the global economy,
Okay.
while other BRICS members might be, more cautious,
Yeah.
fearing, economic backlash
Right.
from the West.
So it's a balancing act
It is, yeah.
between pushing for change and protecting their own like individual interests.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, what are some other fault lines within BRICS that we should be aware of?
Well, there are also just political and ideological differences, right?
Yeah.
So some BRICS members, like Brazil and India, they're democracies
Yeah.
with relatively free markets.
Okay.
Others, like China and Russia, are more authoritarian
Right.
and have a stronger state control
Right.
over their economies.
So it's not just about economic interests, it's about values
Yeah,
and political systems.
it is.
How do those differences play out in the real world?
Well, it can lead to disagreements on issues like human rights,
Right.
sanctions, even military interventions.
Oh, wow.
For example, some BRICS members might be hesitant to condemn Russia's actions in Ukraine,
Right.
while others might feel pressured to align themselves with the West's position.
Okay, so we've got economic disparities, political differences, and then we've got like the classic geopolitical rivalries. Like what's the biggest one we should be keeping an eye on?
Well, I think the relationship between China and India is definitely one to watch.
Okay.
They're both emerging giants, right?
Yeah.
With huge populations,
Yeah.
growing economic clout.
Yeah.
But they also have a long history
Right.
of territorial disputes and strategic competition. It's kind of like a sibling rivalry, but on a global scale.
So they cooperate on some things, but they're also constantly trying to one-up each other.
Yeah.
How does that dynamic affect BRICS as a whole?
Well, it can make it difficult for BRICS to present like a united front
Right.
on the world stage.
Right.
China and India often have different priorities,
Right.
different approaches.
Yeah.
And that can slow down decision making and limit their ability to act decisively.
So it's like a family trying to decide where to go on vacation. Everyone has their own idea of what a good time looks like.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. So we've got all these internal tensions, competing interests within BRICS.
Yeah.
Given that, like, can they really be a credible threat to the U.S.?
That's a good question.
Can they actually pull off this whole de-dollarization thing
Yeah.
and reshape the global order?
I mean, that's the million-dollar question.
It is.
I think BRICS definitely has the potential. I mean, they represent a huge chunk of the world's population
Right.
and economic output.
Right.
But whether they can translate that potential into real power really depends on their ability to overcome these internal divisions
Right.
and present a united front.
So it's not just about individual strength, it's about collective action.
Yeah, it's about working together.
Do you think they can pull it off?
I think it's hard to say for sure.
Okay.
You know, BRICS is still a relatively young organization.
Yeah.
It's going through some growing pains.
Right.
But they've already shown, that they can work together on some issues like creating the new development bank.
Right. So there's a glimmer of hope,
Yeah.
a possibility that they can actually make a difference.
I think so, yeah. I think, we're witnessing a really pivotal moment in history.
Okay.
The old world order is being challenged, and BRICS is at the forefront of that challenge.
Right.
Whether they succeed or not will really depend on the choices they make
In the coming years.
in the coming years. Yeah.
Wow. That's a pretty exciting thought.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It feels like we're standing at a crossroads.
Yeah.
And the decisions made by these BRICS nations and of course the U.S. are really going to have a ripple effect
They will. Yeah.
throughout the entire global economy.
Yeah. It's like watching a high stakes poker game
Yeah.
unfold in real time.
Yeah.
And we're all holding some chips in this game,
Whether we realize it or not.
whether we realize it or not. Yeah.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive. A huge thank you to our expert for guiding us through this complex
You're welcome.
and fascinating landscape.
Happy to be here.
And to our listener, thank you for joining us on this journey.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
We hope you learned something new and that you'll keep exploring these really important questions.
Definitely.
So here's one final thought to leave you with.
Okay.
Imagine a world where power is more easily distributed,
Yeah.
where no single country dictates the rules of the game.
Ah.
Is that a world that you would welcome? Let us know what you think. Until next time, keep those brain cells firing and stay curious.
Absolutely. Yeah. Stay curious.